Halloween on this podcast. This is October 2nd, and I got something a little offbeat for tonight. This came out, I didn't see it as a kid, but I saw it as a younger guy, like a teen, and it made enough of an impact that I wanted to be part of this series. This is, of course, the real Ghostbusters. It's an animated series that went from 1986 to 1991, so for quite a few years. And of course, it's based on the film by Ivan Reitman, starring Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, and the late, great Harold Ramis. It's one of those few incarnations of an animated series based on a real-life film that, I don't want to say it exceeds the feature, but it goes places that they weren't able to within, the confines of an hour and a half or 2 hour long film. This is a particularly special episode for me. This episode just impacted me when I was a kid, and I really want to share it. It's called The Bogeyman Cometh. The basic storyline is that the Ghostbusters are hired by a pair of children to protect them from the boogie monster that comes out of their closet. It's the typical myth that we always, that everyone talks about. It's the boogeyman. This incarnation of the boogeyman, however, the first thing I'm going to say is that this is almost maybe, I'm not sure this was appropriate for children. This goes to a place that's incredibly vulnerable and scary. It's written by Matt Reeves, who was a writer on a ton of great animated stuff in the 80s, from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and the Hulk to He-Man. He did the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He was a supervisor and a writer on Batman the Animated Series, and he wrote The Mask of the Phantasm, which a lot of people do believe might be the best ever filmed version of Batman, animated or not. There you go. Matt Reeves. J. Michael Straczynski was a powerful force on the show too. So while it was a kids cartoon, it had powerfully talented creatives behind it who were, I think, sneaking in a little bit of more mature content within the framework of a kids show, something that was ostensibly a kids show. And you see it here. You see that there's the lighting, the cinematography, but just the tonality too. The idea of a creature that predates on children's fears, that feeds on the terror of young people, is a really intense, mature, and disturbing concept for a afternoon half-hour kids show to be tackling. And that's why I've held on to this. There's an amazing subplot within the episode that Egon, the member of the Ghostbusters, saw the boogeyman as a kid as well. So he's got a history with his character, and there's kind of like a grudge match thing happening. So Egon, while he's obviously the intellectual character, he's the one who's removed from all these emotions usually, and the cold, logic of reason guy. He himself is emotionally invested in this, in this particular case they're on, and that's good writing. That's just really that's some subtle stuff that, again, you don't often see in something of this content. So, and then the other thing I just want to talk about is this idea that within the show, the boogeyman exists in this alternate dimension, which borders the closets of every child in the world. So he can go into this world, travel around. Obviously, this is a very like Alice in Wonderland, surreal, Dada-esque, defies the laws of physics kind of universe that they're in. They're in this Ouroboros loop thing. But the point of kind of what I'm getting to, obviously, here is this is a story about a creature that lives in its own dimension, and that dimension borders on children's closets that he comes out of and scares them. And if that plot sounds familiar, that's because it's the plot to Monsters, Inc. By Pixar, which came out a couple years later. So whether you want to call that a tribute or a direct lift or whatever, it's not my place to say, but I don't think you can ignore the similarities of that. Not every episode of the show maintains the same quality level as this episode. There are ones that are definitely more intended for younger viewers, and they're great in of their own right. But the episodes I really would recommend that stood out for me watching this, or this one, obviously, the Bogeyman Cometh. There's one called Ragnar Rock and Rolla, which is about a ghost with a magic flute that sounds an awful lot like Elvis Presley when he talks, who's after the ghost of his former lover, and it's kind of all about a unhealthy obsessive relationship, someone who can't quit somebody, and again, like real weird deep thinking. And there's also one called Halloween Lasts Forever, where a Jack Skellington type Pumpkin King character, again influential, tries to recruit a bunch of ghosts and make Halloween last forever. That one also features Slimer in a more than supporting role. You can say what you want about Slimer in this show. He's the kid-friendly, adorable, goofy creature. He pervades each episode, even the more serious ones, and for the most part, it's all good stuff. And then there's this episode. This is The Boogeyman Returns. A couple years later, they did a sequel to The Boogeyman Cometh, and it's all about this grudge match, again, with the Boogeyman and Egon. This grown man who's brilliant and brave, fights ghosts all the time, and yet is terrified of this thing that tormented him as a child. And I think, you can make the thematic extrapolations there for, in any way you want, and that's fair. You don't have to get too... We don't have to get too deep into it in this episode, but for our purposes, this is again, it's cool writing, man, and it's great designs, it's spooky stuff. It's endlessly creative. This show was, and I feel like a lot of people don't quite remember it, or barely do, or don't appreciate what they managed to do with this little gem. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Jim Towns. This is October Country Podcast. We will see you tomorrow night. Thank you.